So 4 months ago, I started a brand new Etsy shop with 0 visits and 0 sales, trying to sell 3D printed products. And here are the results. In my first month in December, I got 1,405 visits and made $639.95 in sales. January was even better. I got 2,413 visits and I made $1,610.98 in revenue. February dipped a little bit with 1,199 visits and $798.89 in sales. And in March, I got 1,002 visits and sold $805.70 worth of products. So over the 4 months, I got 6,019 visits and I sold $3,855.52 in revenue. Now, depending on who you are, these numbers might not seem like much to you, or they could seem like a whole lot. But if you ask me, I think it's pretty amazing just based on how much effort I put into this. I started this shop with 3 products, nothing crazy, just high quality made to order stuff that either solves a problem or looks cool. Now, 2 of the products were my own design and the third one was someone else's just because I wanted to see if it would sell. This is me slicing my designs, making sure they're optimized and ready to print. This is the products being printed. This is me post-processing the products, and this is me packaging the products for shipping. I usually print daily, but I ship 2 to 3 times a week. Now, this business is pretty awesome because you're turning cheap plastic into something of value, and the printers are doing most of the work. But don't be fooled, this business isn't 100% passive. There's definitely some downsides you should be aware of. First, like I said, the machines do most of the work. You still have to load filament, fix print issues, reprint broken items, and manage inventory. Post-processing takes time, like adding magnets, threaded inserts, gluing parts together, sanding, painting, etc. Then you have to package and ship everything. And if something breaks during transit, you have to eat that cost and start all over. There's also some hidden downsides as well that often get overlooked. Like, for instance, your printers are going to be running for hours on end, day and night, and they can be pretty noisy. And if you're printing in your living space, you want to make sure you're ventilating properly because these printers are going to contaminate the air you breathe, which definitely isn't ideal. And I'm going to make a whole separate video about that in the future. Also, if you get a lot of orders, you're going to start to feel like a slave to these printers. I mean, even with these Bamboo Lab printers, as good as they are, you still have to check in on them from time to time to make sure, everything's going right. And also when the print's done, you have to clear the build plate for the next print. Also, you can't just take a vacation whenever you want because you're selling physical products. Of course, you can extend your processing times, but you run the risk of having a late shipment or, getting a bad review because someone didn't want to wait that long. Now, I know some people are going to comment you can put your shop in vacation mode, which sounds great on the surface, but depending on what niche you're in, it can definitely hurt your rankings. And that's the last thing you want to do if your product is ranking well, because once you fall off that first page, it can be hard to get back. All right, let's talk about profit real quick. Making sales and earning revenue is great, but what really matters is what you're keeping. On average, I aim for around 30 to 40% profit after materials, fees, shipping, maintenance, labor, and other expenses. So if I'm selling an item for $30, I'm pocketing around $9 to $12 after all the costs. Some products have a higher profit margin, especially if they're simple prints or they require minimal post-processing. Others that need more post-processing can dip below that, which is why I try to keep my prices high. So here's what I'm going to do moving forward. Obviously, I started with 3 products, but I'm going to be adding a lot more. And then I'm also going to be selling on different platforms as well to have as many eyeballs as I can on my products. And lastly, I'm going to start promoting my products on and off platforms with paid ads, and then also by just creating content. Now, if you're thinking about starting your own 3D printing business, here are 3 tips I think will help you out a lot. First is make your listings great, and more specifically is take amazing photos. Now, I'm going to be diving into this more in future videos and my course, but just know high quality photos are one of the best things you can do for your listing and for your business. It's the first thing people see, and you have to make sure you stand out so they click on your listing. Number 2 is price things accordingly. It sounds pretty straightforward, but it's very easy to underprice your items. And if you don't know your numbers, you could be losing money or barely making any money. And if you're putting all your time and effort into creating these 3D printed products, you want to make sure you're making some money. And also, to piggyback off that statement, try to sell products that don't need a lot of post-processing. It's just going to make your life a whole lot easier because the printers are going to be doing most of the work. But that doesn't mean to completely avoid products with a lot of post-processing, because you can definitely still make a lot of money with them. Just make sure you price them high and make sure you really account for all that time, energy, and labor you're putting into it. So that way it's worth it for you. And lastly, my final tip for you is to make sure you split test your photos. Etsy makes it super easy to do that. You can basically duplicate the listing you already have and just change the photo. Now, like I said in my first tip, photos are one of the biggest things you can do for your listing. So having the ability to split test them is really going to make a huge difference in the long run. And to be honest, it can really make or break a listing. You know, a lot of people may think they have a bad product if it's not selling, but in reality, it could just be their crappy photos that are deterring people from clicking on their listing. So yeah, it's just a good idea to split test the photos and see what does best. So at the end of the day, this business has been pretty fulfilling for me, you know, aside from the drawbacks I talked about earlier. You know, I love designing things. I really love the fact that I can print out my designs in-house and ship them to people. And it's just been a great way to make extra income, and I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. If this video helped you out, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. And like I mentioned before, I'm working on an updated version of my course, and you can find more information about that in the description if you're interested. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.